Hello there, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews, and welcome to my Star Trek Strange New Worlds Top 10 first season episodes. I'm just ranking all of the episodes of the first season. This is not a video that I had planned to do. It's not on my calendar, but I've been thinking about my rankings for the season a lot, and then my brother, who some of you may know as Mark from Enchantment of Eternity, did his rankings, so it inspired me to want to do mine. Mine are going to be different than his. And if you're watching this, yours are probably different than mine, and that's okay. Everybody's got their own opinions of which episode you liked more and which you liked less, but I think we all agree for the most part that Strange New Worlds Season 1 was a very successful first season. Okay, without further ado, let me get into my rankings. I'll start with my number 10 and my least favorite episode of the first season. Alright, and we start with my number 10 and least favorite episode of the season. Episode 6, Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach. Love, lift us up where we belong. I don't know, that song always gets in my head every time I see this title. Anyway, so this is the one episode this season that I feel really failed to accomplish what it was attempting to accomplish. It was trying to make this powerful analogy from this society depicted here in this episode to ours, where this society is thriving because of the suffering of one kid. And Allura makes the point to Pike, well, isn't that better than what you guys do? You have people suffering in poverty all the time for you guys to thrive. And Pike says nothing. Says nothing, even though it has been established a million times over. In fact, Star Trek beats us over the head with it all the time, that in Gene Roddenberry's utopian vision, poverty has been eradicated in the 23rd century. That's the whole point of Star Trek, and yet Pike let her get away with that. And I get it, you're making the analogy to our 21st century society. That makes sense, but that's not what they were doing in this show. So it just really didn't work. Also, the world building was very poor. I wish they had spent less time with the romance and more time on world building. Let us know more about the history, the depth of the society, and the characters. I would have been okay, actually, if they just took out the romance altogether. And I also didn't really get why the father of this kid did not immediately ask for asylum from Pike as soon as Allura was out of earshot. Why did he work so hard to keep the secret that worked against his own interest? The answer is plot convenience. This could have been a better episode if they had done it well, but they did not do it very well, and that is why it is my least favorite episode of the season. At number 9, my second least favorite episode of the season, Episode 9, All Those Who Wander, or as I like to call it, Aliens S's. You know, it's a sequel to Aliens because you make it more plural. Anyways, I got that from Saturday Night Live. Anyways, this episode, of course, was just a complete ripoff of Aliens with a little bit of Predator thrown into it, but I could have forgiven it for that if it had as strong of a character story as other episodes had. I couldn't tell who this episode was supposed to be about. In the beginning, I thought this was an Uhura episode, kind of a sequel to her earlier episode in episode 2. But then it very much seemed to be Leon's episode and a sequel to her episode in episode 4. But then it was very much focused on Spock. Now, while I don't think the episode was a total failure, I did like what they did with Spock. I did like what they did with Uhura. Leon's, I thought, felt a little bit thin to me. But I thought this episode was stretched a little too thin on the character stories that they were trying to cover, and it just didn't work. And it just made me focus on the fact that this is Aliens, because I wasn't distracted by a really good character story. Also, I really wish they hadn't killed off Hemmer without developing him at all. It was a character that had a lot of potential, who I was really excited about. So if you're going to kill him off early, then don't even tease me with making him think he's a really good character that I'm going to love. Just kill him off as a red shirt. As they also do in this episode, there's actually a yellow shirt and a blue shirt, but they were so obviously going to be killed off, and it was really, really irritating. So this episode also didn't really work for me, and it's my second least favorite of the season. Okay, now we move on to my number 8, episode 3, Ghosts of Illyria. So now we're getting into the episodes I really liked. So from number 8 onward, I really like them. That just shows how good the season actually was. I gave everything from 8 onward at least a 7 out of 10 rating, and that is indeed what I gave this episode, a 7 out of 10. Overall, I liked it. I loved that we finally got an Una focused episode. I wish we had gotten at least one more in this season. If I have any complaint about the season, not enough Una. And I thought it was really interesting, the reveal that she is genetically modified. And I love how they took on the issue of bigotry and discrimination, and how Starfleet and the Federation, as far advanced as they are in Gene Roddenberry's utopian world, they still have their flaws, and they still do have some bigotry, and specifically against people who are genetically modified, and it comes from their past with genetically modified people, so it's understandable. But I loved how they tackled this issue. What I did not like about it, it's a virus episode. I was so tired of the virus trope by the time Next Generation was off the air. In fact, before Deep Space Nine ever even had its first episode, I was already tired of that trope just from the original series on the Next Generation, and they've done it many more times in Star Trek. Since then, I am so over it. So it's hard for me to give a virus episode any more than a 7 out of 10. And also, this was Una's episode. This was about her. I love this character. I really wanted it to be about her. It should have ended with the resolution of her story. It was her episode, so I felt that her episode was undercut by tacking on this reveal about Mbanga at the end and making it about him all of a sudden. It's not about him, it was about her. So that really bothered me. I think they should have saved that Mbanga stuff for another episode. But overall, I still really enjoyed it, even though it is my number 8 on my list. Now we move on to my number 7, episode 5, SPOCK, AMOCK. This episode featured another trope that I am not a fan of, the body swapping trope. In fact, I would say that I like that trope even less than the virus trope, because it goes beyond just Star Trek. When I was a little kid, I saw Freaky Friday, and then every freaking cartoon that I watched always had their body swap episode, and I kind of got tired of it. So the fact that I like this episode says a lot for the writers at Strange New Worlds and how they were really able to pull this off. It helped me a lot that they kind of mocked themselves, how Spock in T'Pring's body would often say, "Wow, this sounds an awful lot like hijinks." I really love that because it kind of poked fun at themselves. And Spock and T'Pring, you know, even though they didn't have any kind of connection whatsoever in the original series, and it's kind of a retcon to say that they do, I love these two characters together, so I don't care about that retcon. These two actors brilliantly play off of each other, and here they got to play the opposite role, which was a lot of fun. Also, the subplot with Pike was actually really good. Pike gets to show like what a great negotiator he is, and I thought that it was very interesting what that race was trying to do, how they just kind of emulate the different people that they talk to, and how Pike figured that out. So that was really good too. So overall, I enjoyed this episode, but it's a body swap episode. Also, in general, I'm not a huge fan of the lighthearted comedy episodes. Those aren't my favorite type of episodes either, which is why it was a 7 out of 10 and it's number 7 on my list, but I still enjoyed it overall. Okay, at my number 6 is episode 1, Strange New Worlds. I wish they had come up with another title. It does not win the world for most creative title for an episode, that is for sure. But it is probably the strongest premiere episode of any Star Trek show. I honestly can't think of any that would be better than it. It really did an excellent job of establishing the tone, establishing the characters, catching up on the characters that we had already met from season 2 of Discovery, and also introducing us to new characters such as Leon, or new versions of characters we knew from the past, such as Uhura. So it did an excellent job of setting the stage, and now having watched through the end of the season, I really appreciate how the show really bookended its season with that Pike story, with Pike struggling with what he learned from Discovery Season 2 about his future. And I really appreciate how they started with it, came back to it every once in a while, and then ended the season with it. That works really well for me. My complaint about this episode is the speech that Pike gives at the end, and how convenient it was, and how it seemed to just fix all of their problems. That those people in that world were like, oh, thank you, alien, for coming and making a speech. All of our problems are fixed now. Things are a lot more complicated than that, and I didn't appreciate the oversimplification. But overall, I still ended up giving this episode an 8 out of 10. Very strong premiere, and overall very strong episode. Okay, now we move into my top 5, starting with number 5. Episode 2, Children of the Comet. This is the episode that really sold me on the show, if I wasn't already sold on it from episode 1, which I probably was, to tell you the truth. But I absolutely adored the opening of this episode, with Pike cooking dinner for the crew and just hanging back and being laid back and just being a really good captain, and really strengthening the camaraderie amongst the crew. And I love that Ortega's played that little prank on Uhura with the dress uniform, and Pike sees it and goes, "Dress uniform!" Ha! That was so great. And this is a very strong Uhura episode. Coming into this season, I was very iffy on having legacy characters, besides Spock, who we already knew we were going to have. But if you're going to have legacy characters, go ahead and give them more depth than they've had before. And Uhura, unfortunately, was a pretty underdeveloped character in the original series. And so this episode gives us more backstory on Uhura than the previous 50 years had given us before this. And I absolutely loved it. And this was this coming-of-age story, but it was a very strong coming-of-age story. And it speaks to the serialization of this show. I know people call it episodic, but we had the Pike storyline going throughout, and we have the M'Benga storyline going throughout, but also the Uhura storyline, as she would go up and down. She would kind of struggle all throughout the season until we get to episode 9. But this was a really big first step for her, and a really great episode for this character. Okay, now we move on to my number 4, episode 7, The Serene Squall. Now, all the episodes in my top 4 received a 9 out of 10 rating or higher from me, so I gave this one a 9 out of 10 because I freaking loved this episode so much, and it has a lot to do with the lovely queer actress Jessie James Keitel, who I immediately loved as soon as she came on the screen, and she does an amazing job at playing both the Dr. Aspen personality and the Captain Angel personality. And I love the consistency of her relationship with Spock, regardless of which character she was portraying. Even though she could be viewed as a mustache twirly villain, as a Captain Angel, I really appreciated how she still had this connection with Spock, and I think genuinely wanted Spock to join her and his brother in rebuffing logic. And I thought it was a very strong Spock episode. I would make the case even stronger than Spock AMOCK, because I think this episode does the best job of portraying that struggle that Spock goes through between his human side and Vulcan side, which was a recurring theme throughout season 1, but I feel like this episode did it the best. And I really cannot wait to see Captain Angel again. I know that she will be returning. And I'm actually, believe it or not, interested in seeing SPOCK, even though this episode came out just mere weeks after I did my Star Trek V review, where I said I never need to see SPOCK again. But you know what? If they do him right, and he's well written and well acted, which pretty much everything else in Strange New Worlds is, then I'm sure it'll be fantastic. So I love this episode, and I can't wait to see more. Now, moving on to my number 3, my third favorite episode of this season, episode 8, The Elysian Kingdom. Now, I'm not gonna lie, when I saw the trailers for this episode, I expected it to suck. But I went into it with an open mind, and I was pleasantly surprised at how much I absolutely loved this episode. I thought it was just going to be one of those stupid, ridiculous episodes along the lines of Cupid or Hollow Pursuits, where characters are put into a story and acting funky and weird and supposed to be funny, and it's really dumb. I thought it was going to be something like that, but it actually really was funny. It really was a lot of fun seeing Anson Mount get to ham it up as this cowardly, treacherous, a stooge, whatever you call those kings, second-hand man, or what do you call those people? Anyway, and Leon really getting to ham it up with her dog, which I guess is the actress's real-life dog. And Hemmer, even though he was himself, I absolutely loved Hemmer pretending to be the wizard and going abracadabra and transporting people away. It was so good. It was really sad that they had to freaking kill him off in the next episode, but still, I loved him in this episode. But what really makes this my number 3 and a 9 out of 10 rating is that ending. How could you not be in tears at that ending? This is something we had been building up to all season long. This dilemma with Mbamba and his daughter. What is he going to do about his daughter? And in this episode, the stakes are really high because it's about over. He doesn't have much time left. She's not going to last much longer in the transporter. And to have that resolution where he has to let her go was really powerful. And when she comes back as an adult and says, "Daddy, you can let me go now. Go ahead and live your own life." I was bawling. How could you not cry with that? This is such a good, powerful episode. I love this so much. And it was a great payoff for a season-long story arc that we had been following. And that is why it is my number 3 episode of the season. At number 2, my second favorite episode of the season, episode 4, Momento Mori. This episode channeled everything that I love about the original series. Whenever the original series was really good, it was one of those what they call submarine type episodes. But I think of it more as a space-bound episode where all the action is taking place on the ship and mostly on the bridge, as opposed to the old Kirk, Spock, and McCoy beaming down to some planet, which I got kind of tired of. So this episode reminded me of that, but even better. It really showcases what a great captain Pike is, making just split-second decisions, life or death decisions, and knowing that he may not make the right ones because they were tough calls that he had to make, but he made them. And the interactions between the crew throughout this episode was top-notch. A couple of quips between Pike and Ortegas, and a couple of quips between he and Spock. The line where Spock says to him, "That is not what I meant." That was absolute gold. And this was the better Leon story as opposed to the episode 9, which I really got into her backstory. And the Gorn were much more effective in this episode to me because they were more ominous and just kind of this presence that you didn't see but you felt them, and I thought that was more powerful than the aliens stuff that they did in episode 9. So up until the end of the season, I was thinking of this as a 9.5 rating, my favorite episode of the season. But then we get to episode 10. And my number 1 favorite episode of season 1 of Strange New Worlds, yes, it is episode 10, Equality of Mercy. Not only my favorite episode of this season, but easily the best episode of Modern Trek, and one of the greats of the franchise already. I put it up there with two of my other favorite episodes of all time that also involved alternate timelines, Yesterday's Enterprise and A Year of Hell, although technically A Year of Hell is 2 episodes, but you know what I mean. It is up there with the greats. This episode also reminded me a lot of Tapestry, also another great episode in Trek history. And this was a great payoff to the storyline that began in episode 1 with Pike struggling with the knowledge of his future, and it paid it off in a much better way than I ever possibly imagined. I am still grateful to Paramount Plus for keeping the plot of this episode under wraps, because it was such an amazingly pleasant surprise to see that they were not only doing an alternate timeline episode, but they were doing a retelling of the episode A Balance of Terror from the original series, and answering the question, what if Pike had been in charge of the Enterprise during that episode? And I had previously thought of Pike as just a superior captain to Kirk, but this episode proved me wrong. This episode showed that it's a matter of circumstance, that while Pike might be better than Kirk in certain circumstances, Kirk was definitely the right captain for this circumstance, and I really love them bringing in Kirk, and I don't care what anyone says. I think Paul Wesley is a better Kirk than Chris Pine. Chris Pine is playing Captain Chris Pine. He's not playing Captain Kirk. This guy is playing Captain Kirk, and I can't wait to see him again as Lieutenant Kirk next season. But what an amazing character story and an amazing alternate timeline story. And also big shout out to Admiral Pike and the movie uniform. Love it, love it, love it, love it. One of the all-time greats, the best episode of Modern Trek. That's right, a quality of mercy. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching. If you have not already done so, please subscribe, which you can do by clicking on the link in the lower right hand corner. I will see you all soon. Goodbye.